There's no reason why that couldn't be your story.
You don't have an expiration date.
Ooh, I love that.
The actual pages. Like, that's all that matters at the end of the day.
This is the Authors and Agents podcast. Eric, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm super excited to learn more about you, but specifically to hear about With or Without You, which is your latest release. So could you tell us about that book?
Yes, thanks so much for having me. My next book comes out November 7th. It's called With or Without You, and it is a young adult rom-com set in South Philadelphia about two teenagers who work for rival cheesesteak trucks. But the fun little twist that I'm not giving away because it's on the jacket is that the families actually get along just fine. It is a scheme they have engineered in order to get more attention to their trucks. So it's not fake. It's not fake dating, it's fake hating, where they have to pretend they don't like each other, even though they very much do. And their whole relationship is challenged in a really epic way when a reality television show wants to shoot a pilot about the great rivalry. But it's not real. And what do you do when the cameras are on 24/7? So it's quirky and fun, and another sort of ode to living in Philly, which a lot of my books are.
I love it so much. When I first started reading it, I was like, oh, this feels very like fated against each other. But then I was like, oh, they're in love. And oh, it's just so wonderful. So I'm excited for everyone else to enjoy the ups and
Thank
downs of
you.
it. So this is novel number 7, like of just your own. Is that right? Or is it 6?
Yes. No, I think you're right.
I think it's 7. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the 11th book of mine overall, but
Yes.
I think it is the 7th novel. Yes.
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 Wow, that's a wonderful, accomplishment. So tell me about your journey to this point, having book number 7 come out. I know you also are a literary agent, so I know that plays into it, but just kind of tell me how this unfolded for you.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been pretty much writing my whole life. As a little kid, I did oh God. I did this very embarrassing thing where my mom had gotten me this electric typewriter, which is going to date me to everybody who is listening right now, where you would type and type and type and type, and you would hit a button, and then your story would come out, the paper would come out, whatever you typed. There's this very tiny little like Game Boy colored green screen on it that had
I
all the
love it.
text on it. Yeah, so I'd write these like short stories, and then I would give them out to my classmates, and this is like fifth grade. I'd give them out to my
Oh,
friends. I
that's
hope
the
none of those
best.
stories exist still though, because I don't think they were good. Uh, but I always loved it, and I went to college. I was originally a theater major with plans to act and write plays and all this stuff. And
Mm.
I had a teacher sort of give me some tough love, and he was like, you could do all this stuff as an English major without doing the theater stuff that you're not really that good at. And I was like, okay, thank you for the tough love. And that was actually what I needed because I became an English major. I studied with amazing writers and poets, and I did the same thing in graduate school. And when I finished grad school, I was still writing. Got a job in publishing, and a couple years after that, I had a couple essays about video games and relationships go very viral that I had written, and it led to my first book deal. So my first book didn't happen until I was like 30, but I've been building up to it for a very long time.
Which, is a common theme in publishing, I think, right? I mean, you hear the stories of people who are like, I wrote my first book and it just was all, uphill from there. But I feel like the majority of people, it's a very long game
Yeah, 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 no,
of when it
absolutely.
happens. Well, that it does sound like it's just been, a love throughout your whole entire life. So you had these articles that went viral that led to your first book deal. Have you, um, been with the same agent ever since, or have you had switched around?
Yeah, I switched around. I had one agent for my first like 5 books. I worked with
Okay.
all the first 5 books, and then I switched agencies. Which is normal, It happens pretty frequently.
Yeah. Yeah. So so this will pick your literary agent brain a little bit. I love to ask about the querying process, your
Yeah,
experience as a
please.
writer. querying. So how did that go for you when you did have to switch? How did you approach querying? And then like, what would your top querying tip be for people who are in that really hard process right now?
Yeah, so I was in a different space. I had a couple books out already, and I work in publishing, so excuse me, I kind of know everyone, so it's a weird spot to be in to be
Yeah.
pitching again. So I took my time, and there were two agents I really wanted to work with, and I sent them both like exclusive queries, like one at a time. One we didn't quite gel, and the other one we absolutely did, and that was it. So it was a very short sort of process. When I found my first agent, I had done a ton of research because I knew that's what you had to do. And the book I was pitching around was this book called Inked, which is about these teenagers with magic tattoos on their bodies, and they have magic powers because of the tattoos. And the agent I had found then was like an ex-roller derby captain that had a bunch of tattoos and had worked on tattoo books. And I was like, oh, this is probably the person for me. They're all punk rock. They're going to get me. And they did. And back at the time, she was the only agent I queried. I queried one person. And then that was a wrap. So my advice there is just to take your time and do your research. That's what I did. I pitched two agents my second time, one the first time. That's not totally a normal thing for everybody, but like I did the research and I took my time. And there are clients on my list who like pitched me exclusively or pitched me and I offered to work with them that day because the project was so wildly perfect for me. So yeah, take your sweet time.
Yeah, take your time. I think that is good advice, great advice, but it's also hard advice to hear as a querying author, right? You're like, it already takes so much time. I don't want to make it take any more time, but it is really good advice. Do your research, find the agents who are really looking for what you're offering, and so that you're not wasting a bunch of time too, right? Like querying people who aren't going to be the right fit.
Like sometimes it takes a very long time to find a literary agent, right? Absolutely. When you're taking your time, you're doing your research and all that good stuff. But even when you find the agent, it can still take a long time to sell the book. For every client of mine who has had a book sell with me after like 10 days or a month, which is like the dream situation, I have some authors who are on sub for like 2 years before we found their book a good home. And that isn't abnormal. It can take a long time.
Yeah, it can take a very long time. So, yeah, I think a lot of times writers think, okay, I'm gonna get to a literary agent and then it's done. I've made it. It's like, unfortunately, there still are hurdles to get over after that. So my next question for you, I'd love to know, what is something you hope readers take away from With or Without You?
Ooh. Something they take away from With or Without You. So one of the big themes I wanted to tackle in the book was the idea that you don't have to go to college, and I'm guilty of this. A lot of my YA novels, they have pushed that, like the teenagers are saving up to go to college, they're saving up to pay for something, they're hoping to get a scholarship. And, one of the main characters in With or Without You is firmly not going to college. He doesn't want to go to college. He wants to run a food truck. He wants to tour around the country in a food truck and work in South Philly in his own truck. That's his dream. And that's okay. Like you don't have to go to college. You can learn a trade. You can pursue something else. And I think kids need to know that that's okay, because I don't see a lot of books that are pushing that. There are a few these days, but I don't think there's enough. And I think it's an okay message that if that's not your goal, that's all right.
I think that's a great message because there's so many opportunities that you can have without going to college. I didn't go to college right out of high school. I worked my way up, and that worked really well for me. So, there's definitely, not everybody has to take the exact same path.
Yes, absolutely.
So, Eric, I'd love to know who some of your favorite authors are and why you love them.
Ooh, oh my goodness. So if we're talking about young adult books, I think my favorite authors are Jeff Zentner. Everything he writes is beautiful, and he's this sort of master at writing a sense of place in all of his books. That's something I try to do a lot. Like I try to make my books very Philly, and he makes his books very Southern, and like you can just like,
Ooh.
feel it in all of his prose. He's amazing. I would like to be like him when I grow up. Uh, Now I'm like looking at my bookshelf a little bit just to
Yeah.
see who I have up here. Who else do I like? Because there's a thing that happens when you ask someone who their favorite authors are.
Your
Suddenly you
mind just
forget
goes blank. Yeah. You
everybody.
forget every author you've ever read.
My favorite author overall is Nick Hornby. He wrote High Fidelity, About a Boy, endless other books. He's really great at writing, I guess, like sensitive disaster men, right?
Yes,
Like
that's accurate.
yeah, like all the men in his books are a hot mess. My wife refers to them as my sad man books, which I
Mm.
agree that is what they are. But the way he like weaves in pop culture and relationships into all of his stories, like really inspired my books, where I dig into video games and things like that. Um, and I love Lillian Rivera. All of Lillian's books are just like, we talk a lot about books that give you permission, right? When it comes to being a writer, like, oh, this book told me it's okay to pursue this certain
Mm.
kind of thing. And like Lillian writes a lot about like everyday kids, and like working class kids and teenagers of color who looked like me when I was growing up. And like I think when I was writing my fantasy novels, I didn't quite realize I could be writing YA contemporary books about kids that looked like me, that grew up like me. And I remember I read the Education of Margot Sanchez, or maybe it's Miseducation of Margot Sanchez, and it's about this girl whose father owns a grocery store, and she interacts with all the people in the grocery store, and she basically has to like learn to just not be a somewhat, I guess, somewhat privileged kid in her neighborhood, because like her dad
Hmm.
owns a grocery store, and I loved it because she reminded me of everyone I surround myself with. So like, yeah, her. Oh, and Steve Breznoff. One more. He
They're
wrote.
all coming back to you now.
Yeah, so Steve wrote Guy in Real Life, or Girl in Real Life. Oh boy, where's that book? No, I gotta go find it. Wait, there it is. Guy in Real Life, and it's
Guy in real
another
life.
book that like pulls from video games and pulls from
Mm.
geek culture. Him and Whitney Gardner do a really great job of that, and like, yeah, like they're. I just listed a bunch of authors who like gave me permission to work and write. Don't read the comments, because I read those books
Yeah.
and it's like I can write about nerdy stuff, and there we go.
Yes. There you go. Other people want to read about nerdy stuff too, obviously. Well, wonderful. Thank you for sharing those. So you already told me, you've wanted to write and have been writing since you were a little kid. I love the stories about giving short stories to your classmates. And I sort of hope they still exist. Like I hope they cherish those stories. Um, but what would your advice be to someone who's maybe at that point where they've written their whole life, they have this dream, but maybe they're not quite sure what to keep doing with it, or they're feeling like a little bit stuck. Like what advice would you give to that person?
Oh, my advice is to read a whole bunch. So
Mm.
that stuck note is the big one. So when I was in my undergrad and I was in grad school, I was like, all right, here we go. Time to write the great American novel. I'm gonna
Yes.
write my literary fiction. Like I wanted to write a book that like a professor who has elbow patches on would
Would
give to his
love.
undergrads, and be like, this
Yeah.
is this will be good for you, even though the professor never read the book, like those that was the kind of book I wanted to write. And I didn't realize how bad I was at it until like I think I'd written like my second book when I was trying to do it, and I was like sharing it with friends, and all my friends were like, oh, this is great. And then I shared it with some people who weren't my friends for like
Yes.
to build critique partners, and like
Crucial.
I just remember their faces and how like their faces were like, oh, what is this? What are you doing? What is going on here? Like they're pretty brutal, and like so I like stopped for a little while and I was focusing on like essays. But even with the essay thing, I was trying to write literary essays for a long time, and it wasn't until I wrote essays about video games and like my love of games that things started to take off a little bit. And I can pinpoint the exact moment I decided to write YA books. It was because I was working at Quirk Books, and we had signed an then unknown author named Ransom Riggs to do Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to do the blog marketing and reach out to bloggers about this book, but I hadn't read a YA novel and I can't even tell you how long. So I read the book and I was like, oh my God, it was like this lightning bolt. And I picked up a bunch of other YA novels and I realized like that is the voice that I've been wanting to write in. This very like immediate, accessible voice, where like the stakes are very intense even when the stakes aren't intense. You know, that's like the great thing about YA sometimes. So yeah, like I kind of owe it to Ransom Riggs because I read his book and that set me off, and that's when I wrote my first YA novel, and it came out like 3 years later. But it was only because I started reading YA novels that I realized where it was I actually wanted to be. Because I had no idea. Because I was reading a lot of literary fiction, and I love literary fiction. I work on it in my agent life, but I cannot write it. And no one was telling me. And it took me finally reading outside of my comfort zone to discover what I wanted. So, like, please do that, because you can learn so much from other categories and genres. You know, I like make a lot of my friends who want to be writers read romantic comedy. You know, because rom-com authors are masters of dialogue. They're so good at it.
So good.
So good. And you can learn so much. Like, if you're that lit fic writer and you're struggling with dialogue, go read a rom-com. It'll unlock a bunch of stuff. Or go read Ransom Riggs and discover you should be writing YA or something.
I think that's great advice. I think the advice of just read some books. Read any books is great advice. And I love too reading a little bit out of your comfort zone. I love YA mysteries, thrillers, murder mysteries. And recently, I've started reading rom-coms, and my brain has like just exploded a little bit into just like a little bit of pocket of joy, because murder mysteries are not so joyful. So it's been really a really fun like break to read something so different. So I think that's great advice. So speaking of kind of trying a different genre or reading in a different genre, if you were ever to write, and I know you've written different genres in the past, but if going forward, if you were to genre hop, what would you want to write?
Ooh, I mean, I'd love to write an adult rom-com. You know, I did write one. It didn't sell, and that's okay. I will try. I will try again.
Yes.
But I would love to crack. I'd love to crack that because they're so much fun. They're just so packed full of joy, and I feel like all of my favorite adult romantic comedies, they do this thing where they dig into grief in a really big way.
Yes.
Even though it's like this light and fluffy story, I love the balance of that so much. Like there's this great book that just came out called Love at First Set by Jennifer Dugan, and it's this great rom-com about this woman who falls for another woman that's working out at her gym, and it turns out that her family owns the gym, and there's this whole saga that unravels. But like at the heart of the book, there's this very complicated, messy relationship with her really horrible mother that she has to like unpack over the story. And Rachel Lynn Solomon does that a lot too, where she digs into like mental health in a lot of her books, even though it's a fluffy rom-com. And just I want to figure out that balance because it's so brilliant, and you can reach so many people, you know.
So many people. I just read, well, it was like 15 books ago, but I read You with a View by Jessica Joyce, which is an adult rom-com, but it deals with the grief of losing her grandmother, and it is so like beautifully woven throughout the book. And at the end, I was thinking about my grandma and thinking, I pulled out all her cards, and I was like, how is a rom-com book making me think about my grandma and like missing her? It was quite beautiful. So I think you're right on there.
That's so good.
My next question, I'd love to know, what is some bad writing or publishing advice that someone has given you or that you've heard?
Ooh, bad writing or publishing advice. That's a good question. Let me think. I hear very often that like as an author you should brand yourself, and you should have a brand. You know, like I only write nerdy YA novels, or I only write fluffy romantic comedy. And I think that's bad advice for writers, right? Because like you should be able to explore other genres and dig into other sort of categories. And just a casual look at a bookshelf in a bookstore will show you that authors do that all the time. All the time. I'm lucky enough to work with a writer named Nita Tyndall, and if you look at their three YA novels, their third one comes out next year. Like, the first YA novel is YA contemporary, the second YA novel is World War II historical, and the third one that's coming out is like a YA paranormal serial killer thriller.
Very different.
Yeah, you can jump everywhere. Like, look
Yeah.
at Lee McGinnis, look at Erin Bowman. There's so many authors that are all over the place. So, like, don't feel like you need to pigeonhole yourself because someone on Twitter said to do that. Because that's not the case. Look at your bookshelf.
I love that. I think that's great advice because I do think you hear that where you're like, okay, you're a murder mystery writer and that's all you're ever going to write. But that's so hard. What if you don't want to write a murder mystery and you want to write something different?
No, it drives me up a wall. And, like, if you look at we were just talking about rom-coms. If you look at Ashley Herring Blake, who's like a big best-selling rom-com author now these days. She wrote a bunch of YA novels. She wrote a bunch of middle grade novels. Like, she was everywhere. So do what you want.
Do what you want. Yeah, don't pigeonhole yourself with that. So I just have two questions left for you, and they're fun, easy questions. I'd love to know what's something you like to do when you're not writing, or not being a literary agent, not in the book world. What's something you like to do?
Oh, I don't have my Game Boy up here with me. Usually I have my Game Boy charging right there. It's not a Game Boy. I have a it's called an analog, and it is it looks like a Game Boy, but it plays Game Boy Advance games and standard Game Boy games and Game Gear games, all these different things. So I like to play video games. So I've been playing old school RPG games on that, and then I've been playing Diablo 4 on my Xbox. What else do I like to do? I cook a lot.
Oh yeah.
I'm the person in the kitchen in my family. I do all the things. I garden very poorly. I kill
Me
most.
too.
Yeah,
me too.
kill mostly everything, but I try. I killed an apple tree recently. I didn't think it was possible because it's a tree. I didn't maintain the pot right, so we learn. So yeah, no, garden, video games, cooking. That's probably it. Mostly, I'm chasing my kid around.
Yeah. What's your signature dish? What's your favorite thing to make?
I am very good at making different kinds of chicken wings. Making my own rubs and my own little spices. Let me see, what else do I like making a lot that my kid likes? Different kinds of pastas for him. Different kinds of steak prepared differently for my wife. I make my own compound butter at home, which comes out very nice when I take it to the fridge and I slice it up for everything.
Yeah.
Wings, steak, lots of unhealthy things, but I make a very good chicken Caesar salad, which is my lunch every day.
Yeah.
Because otherwise I hear my doctor yelling at me somewhere.
Well, I have started making, my husband and I just started doing chicken wings at home because we did Whole30 and we've done all these different things, but we're trying not to eat out as much. And so we've done chicken wings at home, and it's actually so much better than buying them somewhere else or at a restaurant. It's been delicious.
I highly recommend lemon pepper. That is my favorite.
Ooh, I haven't done lemon pepper yet. I need to. So my last question for you, it's not a hard one, I promise. You have lots of books I know you could answer this one with, but I'd love to know what your favorite book is right now. Not your favorite book of all time, just something you've read recently that you want to tell people about.
Favorite one I read recently. I'm looking on my shelf because I want to get the title right. Oh yeah, here we go. So I finished reading Sammy Espinosa's Last Review by Taylor Kangmia. It is a adult romance novel about a music journalist who is basically given one last shot to redeem her career because she was dating a musician and reporting on her, and you're not supposed to do that. So she goes back to her small town where the rumor is this rock star that she has a connection to from years and years and years ago is secretly recording a new album. And she bumps into him, and he doesn't remember who she is. and they proceed to go on a bunch of dates, and she starts to fall in love with him, even though she is supposed to write this giant expose about this guy. And weaved in the middle of it is the fact that she's had this like horrible mother her whole life, who has like regularly abandoned her, and when she goes back home, she bumps into her grandmom. And it turns out her grandmother wanted to adopt her into the family so badly, but the mom kept her from her all these years. So it's this like family reconciling story blended in with this like, I'm hiding this deep secret from you and I'm falling in love with you story with this rock star. And it's so good. And I cried, I laughed. Yeah, everyone should read this. It's really, really good.
And see, again, adult romances, just doing all the things that we love.
Yes.
Well, wonderful.
It's super funny. I don't know if it's being marketed as a rom-com. I don't know. It's a little more serious. But it's definitely an adult romance for sure.
Yeah. Well, Eric, I'm super excited for With or Without You to come out and for everybody to fall in love with these food truck families and to see what happens. And I can't wait to see what comes next for you. So thank you so much for chatting with me, telling me all about your journey, and sharing these, great tips, which I know people love to hear.
No, anytime. This was lovely.